As the situation dragged in Ukraine, the world was watching with bated breath, knowing the death toll on soldiers and civilians would be unbearable. Attempts to negotiate ceasefires were made, but within weeks they had been broken, and the diplomats had to start all over again. The United Nations had turned into a circus where heated opinions were being thrown around, but nothing constructive was being achieved. It was within this backdrop that the two most controversial figures in the modern history found themselves in the nucleus of an outlandish deal: Donald J. Trump and Vladimir Putin. His goal as he took office was to put America first while solving international conflicts. After all the back and forth, hostile interactions between the United States and Russia, he was ready to make an attempt and change his legacy. Putin, who was straining under pressure from both domestic and overseas forces, sensible enough to realize that prolonging the conflict would only serve to further weaken Russia, all of a sudden there was an option of negotiations on the table which, at one point, felt impossible: the summit in Geneva. In what would not only be the first meeting between these two, but the first meeting to ever take place in a region considered neutral, Trump and Putin agreed to meet in Geneva, Switzerland. The rest of the world watched as the city was filled with media outlets desperate to get any details or paints about the meetings. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Trump, the attention seeker that he is, was reclining in his chair with his hands folded in front of him and a smug expression on his face. "Listen, Vladimir, no one wants this war, and I know you and you know me. We are both strong men at the end of the day, but this war does not benefit anyone. It's bad for business." While putting a slight emphasis on the bad for business part, Putin's composed face betrays no emotion as he examines Trump. He was able to outsmart many politicians before him, but the great Trump was a wild card. "America still seems to be keeping its military supply lines to Ukraine open," he said, cool, calm, and collected. "You preach love, but your nation fuels hostility towards me and my people. Come on, Trump. I know that your domestic situation is dire. The economy is in a downward spiral, the sanctions are harsh, and the people are hurting." Rather than offering a solution, Trump decided to create suspense by pausing. "Let's make a deal." The goodwill gesture and the prisoner swap. Both heads of states were cognizant that reaching a mutual agreement would take a while. However, these countries could build upon these constructive steps. Emphasizing his stance further, Putin finally agreed to Fogel's terms of release, the American teacher who was in prison for drug-related charges. It was a symbolic move that served its purpose by gaining the United States' attention and making headlines. Trump, for instance, indicated that he would motivate diplomatic efforts to lift some sanctions if progress was made. The deal prepared the ground for the next and most difficult step: securing an actual ceasefire in Ukraine. Zelensky and the hard truths. While Trump and Putin put up a facade of diplomacy, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was not that easily convinced. He had spent too much energy for his country's sovereignty to simply accept a settlement fashioned by superpowers without Ukraine directly participating in it. Trump arrived in Kiev on a heavily guarded flight and came face to face with an uninterested Zelensky. "As I have said, what you are doing is commendable," Trump uttered, "but Ukraine's inclusion in NATO is not happening anytime soon. Both you and I are aware of this, and neither is Putin budging without an offer." "I can't surrender our land through negotiation," said Zelensky. "Exactly," Trump said while nodding, "and you should not. But let's be clever about that. Perhaps there is a way to end the war without conceding what truly matters." The recently held consecutive meetings resulted in a proposal where, once Russian troops withdrew from pivotal areas of Ukraine, a peace zone would be set up backed by an international order. They would also agree to postpone Ukraine's bid for NATO membership. Everyone appeared doubtful regarding the proposal, with Russian hardliners viewing any sort of retreat as a loss, and Ukrainian nationalists as refusing to postpone NATO membership. However, the prolonged war is not an appealing alternative. The agreement and its fallout. The world was watching closely when Trump and Putin did their last press conference in Geneva. With the signing of the document, the most important milestone in international relations in years was achieved. Many responded to the news with varying degrees of relief, suspicion, and cautious optimism. The real challenges remained. How long could the deal actually last? Were the two sides ever really going to follow through on their obligations? And what was the story going to say about a moment when two of the most controversial leaders decided to ignore their differences, at least for a very short moment? It would only be revealed in the future.